Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming in and attending our webinar. And this afternoon, I would like to share first of all about SES EA chapters. So prior to that, I think just a general announcement. This session will be recorded. And if you have any question during the presentation, both myself or Benjamin, you can just type in the Q&A chat bot. Then after that, we will look into it at the end of the session. So we don't want to have any interruption. So you just key in your question. And also at the end of the day, of the presentation, there will be the QR code for you to fill in the feedback. So the feedback is very, very important because we are running the so-called society. We need to get the feedback from the participants like yourself so that we can improve in our next session. So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce about our EA chapters and the objective. So of course, our objective is aligned with our intent as a nation. We want to accelerate so-called realization of digital nation. And enterprise architecture is one of the way we can achieve that. So I will be presenting more in my presentation about this. And the next one, of course, we want to do a knowledge sharing like today, right? Because there's something good like the most recent so-called IMDA skill feature for ICT that we found it very, very relevant for us to upscale, upgrade, and also to make us higher in terms of the competency and maturity. So all these are very, very critical, especially today in driving continuous digital transformation. And of course, we also want to align with the IMDA mission. We want to develop local talent because today there isn't much really local talent on the EA. So pretty much most of them are import talents. So we really hope that through our program, our series of awareness, we can develop a local architects to be a world class, which I think we already have in our community, but we need more as we accelerate our transformation. Yeah, so the architect that we are referring here, there will be a business architect, data architect, software architect, infrastructure architect, and solution architect, as well as security architect that are defined in the latest skill feature that I'm going to describe in my session. And of course, we want to grow our membership to have more and more. So these are the current about 700 so-called architects that are actively involved in our activities. And for your information about our Exco, so we have a blended flavor of Exco from government link company, government agency, as well as from the multiple sectors, right? From aviation, from finance, from healthcare. So all these are basically giving us a flavor in terms of where the architects so-called are playing a role. Yeah, so hope that you can support us. If you are not the SES member, you can become our member. And if you're already a member, please join our chapters. And these are a series of events that we are running. So far we have run 4 events. So today is actually our 5th event for the year. And we still have another 4 more events coming up. So the next upcoming one will be on the 3rd of June, whereby we are going to do a collaboration on the Enterprise Architecture Symposium beyond the Singapore Computer Society. So this time around, we are going to collaborate the Hong Kong Computer Society, because the enterprise architecture in the Hong Kong Computer Society, I think, is about 6-7 years older than us, right? So our big brother there, but we are working very closely because I think Hong Kong, Singapore also have many collaborations, right? So and their architecture community also growing pretty strong, yeah. And of course, we are running the next upcoming event and also EA Awards that I'm going to share shortly. So about EA Awards, so for those of you who have involved in the enterprise architecture or your organization have enterprise architecture, this is the chance for all of us to be recognized. Because what happens is that architect typically doing a good job, but is getting a very little recognition. I mean, if nothing go wrong, nobody remember us. But if something goes wrong, they will call us. So this is a time that for us to honor and also get ourselves recognized, right? That's why we are offering this so-called running this series, and hopefully this can run for many years to come. So the objective, of course, as mentioned, to get recognizing the local enterprises that has embarked into the successful digital transformation using the enterprise architecture practices. Yeah, and of course to showcase, and of course we also want to hear the story about the success. And there are 2 categories. The first one is on the digital transformation and innovation, or the second one about customer centric and the service excellence. So this is how the so-called enterprise architecture or transformation can help to achieve these two categories. Yeah. In the future, of course, we will be opening up to more categories, but at the moment we are focusing on these two categories. And of course, they got the email and the website that you can find out more. So let me just briefly on the awards. So they got a so-called 3 level of distinction award. They got achievement, outstanding, excellent, and of course, they in each of the category there will be EA of the Year awards. So basically, 3 level in each category, and there will be so-called overall awards for each of the category. So this one become a so-called the memento or the achievement that architect community can be recognized. In terms of the judging, so there will be a first level of judges by the panel. Just now you saw our Exco team. So they will be so-called doing the first review. And also we have a so-called tabulated score sheet. Then after that, of course, we have the industry independent advisor and assessor as well, Dr. Kwong Yikwa and Ong Witek, that both actually have now doing, of course, a professional job as architects and also running the business, and they also have a taught in the NUS before and the topics of enterprise architecture. And of course, we also, the second level, we led the ISA Global to assess and review our nomination. So basically, we benchmark with the world best, right? Because we cannot be biased. We also need to get the feedback from the international architect community. Then finally, of course, we will nominate and let the council, SES council at the highest level to agree and award the so-called nominees. So submission deadline, the format all available on the website, the limit up to 8,000 words, right? And of course, we need to highlight on your how EA has helped your organization to solve enterprise problems. So I mean, the scenario typically is that the head so-called firefighting scenario, or IT become a cost center and many project failure and business IT relationship, and how enterprise architecture has so-called resolved that issue. And of course, the impact and benefit that EA program bring to the organization. And these are some of the timeline. The deadline is 30th of July, so we still got exactly 2 months, actually 2 months plus. Right now it's end of May, we got June, July, so it's still got plenty of time. Yeah, not 30th of May, 30th of July. But of course, don't leave it until last minute to prepare this submission. Okay, then there will be a candidate presentation on the 21st, 30th September. Then of course the announcement will be October. Then we will have the award ceremony. Okay, finger crossed. Hopefully, the COVID-19 can subside and we can have a physical award ceremony. Okay, otherwise we have to do it virtually. But let's see how it goes. Right. So for more information, please go visit our website scs.org.sg/award/year award 2021. Okay, all the information, and also they have a recorded video briefing on this awards. Right. So with that, I would like to invite Benjamin, and also hand over to him, of course, to introduce to us about the so-called ICT skill framework. Yeah. So with that, Benjamin, over to you.
Hi. So thanks, Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benjamin from IMDA's Human Capital Development Division. So thanks for joining us today for this webinar session, and thanks to SCS for inviting me to share on the skills framework for ICT. So for this session, I'll be giving an introduction to the skills framework for ICT, including its background, what is it about, what is its structure, as well as components, as well as how can it be used for different stakeholders. I understand that Aaron, who is speaking after me, will be going more in depth on the different architect roles. So I will not go into detail on the specific roles, but rather my intent here today is more to just provide an overview of what the skills framework is about, as well as understanding on how can it be used for different stakeholders. So just I'll start off first with the background for the skills framework for ICT. So the skills framework is actually an initiative of Skills Future, and it was jointly developed by IMDA, Skills Future Singapore, Workforce Singapore, in consultation with employers, industry association, as well as education and training providers. And the intent of developing this whole framework was to provide a common skills reference so that stakeholders can use it in career planning as well as skills mastery. And it was initially launched in 2017, but it was also subsequently refreshed in 2020 to include more newer roles in AI, data protection, as well as 5G. So before I go into the skills framework for ICT in proper, just to give a brief introduction of what's the structure of the skills framework. They are typically developed based on sectors. So based on last count, I think there are 33 skills frameworks across different sectors. However, for certain skills frameworks, they are actually cross-sectorial in nature, meaning they cut across different sectors. So examples of such skills frameworks would be ICT, HR, as well as accountancy. And within each skills framework, there will be a career map that outlines the different career paths that a job role can move or progress into. So for each job role in particular, there are two pieces of information to take note. One is the critical work functions and key tasks. These are basically the job functions and tasks that a specific role or individual does as part of his job scope. As well as the next piece of information will be the skills needed to perform the job functions. So these are split into two categories here, as you can see. One is the technical skills and competencies, which are the hard skills or technical skills that you need to do your job. So for the skills from ICT, it will be the IT related skills. And the next one will be the generic skills, or in other words, the soft skills. So examples of such skills would be communication, teamwork, as well as critical thinking. So based on this structure, we will, or rather training providers as well as government agencies can then use this to actually develop training programs, upskills individual and respective job roles, as well as to close any skills gaps. So now to go into the skills framework proper, right? Give me a moment. So for the skills framework for ICT, there are 7 job clusters here, as you can see. Data and artificial intelligence, infrastructure, software and applications, strategy and governance, operations and support, cybersecurity, and lastly, sales and marketing. And within these 7 job clusters, you can see that there are 32 job functions. So by job functions, we mean that you can call it subclusters under each cluster. So for example, if you look at the data and AI cluster, you can see that under it, there is business intelligence, data engineering, machine learning, data science, as well as AI and applied research. And underpinning all these 32 job functions are the 104 job roles that make up the skills framework for ICT. So just to give an illustration of what all this means, right? This is an example of the software applications job cluster. So you can see here that there are 3 job functions here: software engineering, embedded systems engineering, as well as UI design. So just to give an example, say I start off as an associate software engineer, for example, under the bottom left corner. I can progress vertically upwards into a software engineer and subsequently to either a software architect or a software engineering manager. However, if let's say I want to explore a parallel area, for example, or adjacent area, so DevOps has been an up and coming area in line with the agile as well as cross-functional trends of the industry, right? So I can actually build on my existing skills as a software engineer to actually transit to this area with perhaps some additional training or skills that is needed for me to take on this role. So this is an example of how you can read the career map of the skills framework. Another relevant example, since today's topic is on ICT architecture, right, would be the strategy and governance job cluster in the skills framework. So under this job cluster, you can see that there is the enterprise architect role, there is a solutions architect role, as well as the business architect role. And roles in this cluster are usually cross-functional, meaning that they actually work across and with different functions such as software applications, data, cybersecurity, to design, develop, as well as operationalize products and services for customers and within their own organizations as well. So let's say if you want to find out more about what an enterprise architect does in particular, right? The skills framework actually has information such as the job description of what this role is about, what are the critical work functions and key tasks that this role does. So for the enterprise architect, for example, it formulates the architecture strategy. He or she develops the architecture requirements, manages the quality and improvement of the architecture, and so on. And under each critical work function, you can see there's a series of key tasks here that actually makes up the critical work function. So a key task here will be a particular task that you do as mainly your day-to-day job or on a project basis. So leading the ecosystem-wide technical and business discussions in respect to future enterprise direction would be part of a key task under formulating organization architecture strategy, for example. And after understanding the work functions of a particular role, the next piece of information that most people will be interested in will be what are the skills that you need to perform these functions. So you can see here that for the enterprise architect role here, there is the skills framework actually lists out the skills that you need to perform the role of an enterprise architect. So skills such as agile software development, some business related skills here, design and architecture, strategy, as well as project management skills are all needed for one to become as a competent enterprise architect. But one thing to note is that these skills are not exhaustive, meaning that we do understand that different organizations operate differently and they require different skill sets. So the intent is more to serve as a guide on what are the typical skills that a role needs, and employers and individuals would then have to contextualize it accordingly based on this list based on their specific job scopes. And lastly, for the TSCs in particular, right, or technical skills competencies, there are actually different proficiency levels that indicate the depth or mastery of a skill. And these proficiency levels can range from levels 1 to 6, with level 6 being the highest level of mastery of a particular skill. So for this example of an enterprise architect skill, for example, the proficiency levels for this skill ranges from level 4 to level 6, with level 4 signifying that one is able to articulate impact of trends and alternative strategies on enterprise architecture, and level 6 signifying that one is able to envision and lead the development of a future-ready enterprise architecture and strategically manage resources. So this is one example of how do you read the different proficiency levels of technical skills competency in a skills framework. So with that, so hopefully now we have a general idea of what the skills framework is about and how it works, right? I will now touch on some possible users of the skills framework for different stakeholders. So I have grouped the stakeholders here into 4 main buckets. So I'll start off with the individuals first. For individuals, let's say if they are students, they can actually use the skills framework for education and career planning purposes in terms of what courses they should take in school or what careers can they embark on after graduating from their courses. And even after entering the workforce, for example, as an ICT professional, they can actually use the skills framework to identify what skills they lack or need and what roles they can progress to or move into as part of their career planning. Next would be enterprises. For enterprises, the skills framework can be used for recruitment purposes, especially for HR practitioners who might not be exactly familiar with certain business functions or technical roles. So this is where the skills framework can come in for HR practitioners or even for line managers to craft job postings, job descriptions, or even to use them to assess candidates. They can also use the skills framework in performance and career management by assessing whether employees have the skills or experience to perform job functions of a role and whether or not they are ready to progress into a role or to a different role. And if there are certain skills that are lacking in an employee, either technical skills or soft skills, the skills framework can actually be used to identify what are the skills and training needed as part of learning and development plans. Next, moving on to education and training providers. The jobs and skills in the skills framework can actually serve as a guide to develop new courses or to review the curriculum as part of the existing courses. And as part of IMDA's and I believe other government agencies' efforts to support or fund courses, right, we actually do request for training providers or course providers to align their courses to the skills framework as much as possible. And lastly, for government agencies like ourselves, like IMDA, we also use the skills framework as a common reference and language in coming up with analysis of what are the skills gaps in our workforce, and then we're from there coming up with skills and manpower interventions to develop our workforce professionally. So if you're interested to find out more information and details on the skills framework, you can actually refer to either IMDA's or Skills Future Singapore's web pages, where you can actually download more detailed documents on the specific roles and skills in the skills framework. Or alternatively, you can just do a Google search. You can just type in skills framework ICT and you'll be able to see the links below as coming out parts of search results. And from there, I hope you will be able to get the skills framework will be useful for you, as well as you have a better idea of how to use it in the future. So with that, I will end my presentation, and I think I'll hand the time back over to Aaron.
Right, thank you so much, Benjamin, for the comprehensive, brief yet comprehensive information about skill framework. So the next one, I will be going to share on the more detail on the enterprise architecture so-called roles, right? Because I think the current skill framework have, I would say, very, very comprehensive in terms of the defining the enterprise architecture skill set, as well as the so-called the categorized into ICT skill, generic skill, and also go into which or type of the cluster of the group of the competency. I will be sharing that shortly. So before that, let me just share with you on the run through, because somehow people may be asking about what's the difference between enterprise architecture, what I knew before, and today we mentioned about digital EA. Okay, so that's just to give you a perspective that if you can see my slide here, somewhere in the 2013 is where the so-called digital EA name is first mentioned, and towards, of course, until now, right? But if you see the graph here, this graph, if you follow the stock market, 1987 is where the stock market crashed, right? Now after that, booming in 1997. So the enterprise architecture also, I don't know why, following that pattern. Okay, peak at the year maybe 2000. After that, market crash. Okay, so at the 2011, 12 was actually is the bottom of the enterprise architecture. Many of the enterprise architecture team was defunct. So basically, they are no longer needed, because I think the organization see them not valuable at all. But interestingly, I think Gartner has been so-called following the data, and actually in the 2012 making the turnaround, where the enterprise architecture focusing a lot on the business outcome driven EA. Okay, then I will share with you that today, of course, in our the most recent the IMDA skill future, it has a lot of the business component and business aspect, which is the right way of the so-called enterprise architecture. Because in the prior to that I come across to many of the organization or the team, they told me that when I want to talk about EA, they tell me talk to my technical skill level 5, right? So level 500, they mean super hardcore technical. They don't know anything but technical, right? If you ask them about business, they will tell you, Aaron, I think you asked the wrong team. You should ask the business team. I am the architecture team. So you can talk to me about TCP/IP, about SML, about cloud, about anything, but don't talk to me about business and strategy. And I will prove you wrong in the next couple of slides. Okay, because this is what the Gartner is aligning, and what I think IMDA has done a great job in defining the right so-called definition and the skill requirement for architect to be successful. Yeah. And of course, this is just now 2013, right? So 2014, actually, Gartner also make a prediction that the world by 2025 is super connected, right? Hyperly connected. Meaning what we do internally, it will impact many other people, many other departments internally as well as externally. And also the ability for the organization, not only looking at the inside out, but we need to look outside in and outside out, right? So basically, this is something quite interesting. It's like, the mess of network. And our world today, whatever happening like in Singapore, we cannot deny that our neighboring country in the world also watching it, right? This is what it means. So we need to have to be so-called to have a system, to have a proper architecture in place, so that if should anything happen, we know how to mitigate, right? we don't panic. Yeah. So this is what Gartner made a prediction by 2025. Gartner made prediction in 2014. In 10 years time, it will be like this. But actually now with the COVID happening now, we don't need to wait 2025. Now it's 2020, 2021 already happening like this. We really need to ramp up our so-called our transformation, our effort in adopting the right technology for the business. And of course, in the 2016, Gartner also make another so-called statement about the EA as the gateway for digital transformation. Of course, sadly enough to hear that quite a number of digital transformation team actually not doing too well, because what they do is actually they are doing the same way as the executing IT project, but they have the title of the project with the word digital. Okay, do you know why? Because if they don't put the word digital, they will not get the approval or the budget. So it's the same project that they did 10 or 15 years ago, but now with the word digital. So that's why Gartner issue a statement on the, the gateway for digital transformation is enterprise architecture. And of course, interestingly, in 2019, about 3 years ago, Gartner made a prediction every year on the EA. Right? So in here, as you can see here, Gartner said that EA evolved into an internal management consultancy. So if you are working in the typical organization, if you are used to engaging a world-class management consultancy, typically if you are a listed company, before you do a so-called a press announcement about your annual report, etc., you engage the strategic consulting company, right, to give you the overview what you should be saying to the public, so that to gain confidence. So here Gartner said that your EA team should evolve into an internal management consultancy. Basically, it's providing consultancy to the senior management, right? Not only about IT system, but advising the whole organization in terms of strategy, about vision, mission, about transformation. That's 2019. Interestingly, in 2020, 2020, so Gartner made another prediction that EA team should enable or transforming an organization to be an intelligent organization. So what do you mean by intelligent? Intelligent means if someone tell me or tell you that you are intelligent, means you know many things, right? Whatever I talk to you, discuss something about topic, you can relate. Wow, this person is intelligent, right? Compared to the person, you talk something, they don't know. What are you talking about? I don't know, I never heard about this. Then it's very difficult, right? So this is where the enterprise architecture playing a critical role, because remember just now the connectivity. So this is where the so-called architect should be able to provide so-called information whenever the business key stakeholders asking. So we should be able to provide that, yeah? So this is where the so-called intelligent organization. And interestingly, this year, Gartner make another prediction for the EA in 2021. They got the link there. Later, I think you can download the slide. That EA actually designed the composable organization, right? Meaning that because now we have to work from home, right? We have to work from anywhere. So we don't need to be constrained to work in the central location. We need to be able to work, decompose into multiple smaller organization or smaller team. Right? So this is where the Gartner predict 2021. Of course, next year will be another Gartner predict 2022 on the EA. Yeah, so this is what I can see the connection and how so-called EA playing a critical role today. So let me now go into the EA defined in the skill framework for ICT. I think just now Benjamin has described in quite detail. So let me just so-called actually this is all extracted from the IMDA booklet itself. So EA itself should operationalize a business strategy on the planning and development of the business structure and model to facilitate evolution of the business towards its desired future state. It is fully aligned with what just now, if you see all the Gartner predict, that architects should be able to play this role, okay? But of course, the reality is that many architects today lack or so-called but this a business competency. But not to worry, later I will share with you how we can beef up this skill set. But this is the right definition that EA actually helping to operationalize the business strategy. Because today there isn't any business strategy that can run without technology. They need to be so-called supported by the technology. That's why the architect playing a critical role. And of course, we need to also review and prioritize the market trend, evaluation of alternative strategy, and strategy evaluation. So meaning we need to be like just now in the Gartner context is inside out, right? We need to see what happened in the world out there, right? What sort of the technology adoption, what are our competitors doing, what are so-called the industry, the segment that we are in. We need to know that, and then we can so-called influence our senior management to adapt the right strategy. So it's really a lot of demand and expectation to become an architect today. Yeah, not only looking at the TCP/IP, server, cloud, and etc. That's one is taken. We need to look into that, but we need to go beyond that, right? We need to be able to help the business to review their strategy. So, of course, just as we mentioned that in the EA itself, the so-called the proficiency is a level 4, 5, and 6, right? So this the highest level is level 6. This is where the development of the skill set itself is very, very critical. If we have more architects in every organization today, right, the organization should be able to weather the storm, right, in terms of the disruption, in terms of the competition, and etc. Yeah, because you can see the definition of architect actually even like these 2 paragraphs, but actually it's very, very heavy and carry big responsibility. So who's the architect? Let me just go back into the very basic, right? How you define architects? Okay, so this is the definition. Let's borrow from the building architect. So the building architect, they got 2 components to become the building architect. If you want to be successful architect or famous architect in Singapore or in anywhere in the world, right? You need to be able to blend between the art and science of designing and erecting building to realize the vision of the building owner, right? So the building owner itself is because they are the one who come out the money. So you need to be able to understand them, right? In our context, of course, is the stakeholders. That's very, very important. The second one, of course, if you want to be a famous doctor, you also need to blend between the art and science. You cannot just say, oh, in my medical study in the last 6 years, I only know that if you're headache, I give you Panadol. That's science, right? But in the reality is that this headache is not caused by the normal headache. It could be caused by the tumor. So you need to be able to analyze and understand the art part, right? For the so-called how to cure or heal the patient. Likewise for architects, right? It's the art and science of designing and delivering valuable technology strategy for the business. So first thing first, we need to know what is the business intent, what they are trying to do. Then from there, we apply our knowledge about technology, we apply our knowledge about digital, and how we can help or turn or transform our business towards digital by applying both art and science. Yeah? Basically, art and science means like no fixed rule. That doesn't mean you work successfully transformation in the one of the company, you move to another company, might be successful. No, it's the different recipe, right? The same thing like doctor. Same headaches, patient coming to see the doctor. If the doctor are very intelligent, they will not apply the same medicine. The doctor know how to adapt to it. Right? That's the expectation of architect. So of course, how to become architect yesterday, right? At least you have 10 years of IT project implementation. This is the general term, right? People tell you, you're still too young, you know, you don't have the white hair. So, you know, you cannot become an architect. That's the common perception today we have in the industry. And of course, the second one, you also need to be performing multiple roles in the business and IT, right? Perhaps you have gone through in your life as the business analyst, as a data scientist, as a cloud engineer, as a strategist, as a CIO, as a CTO, etc. That's expectation. If you want to become architect, if you just know the definition, it's very demanding, right? Then the next one, of course, this is we are very, very lucky, right? Fail in a couple of large IT project implementation. Fail means miss deadline, miss schedule, miss resources, miss functionality, miss timeline, everything miss. Okay, and we burn millions of dollars, and nobody put us in jail. I think we are one of the luckiest profession in the world, right? The second luckiest profession in the world that are performing, they mean lucky enough like us, is the weather forecast. And when the weather forecast today said that this afternoon in Singapore going to be heavy rain, but today actually quite sunny day, right? Nobody going to blame the person, right? They said the act of God. So the same thing in the IT project. But actually, if you trace into the root cause, there must be something wrong that they should be in place, but they are not in place, right? So this is what happened, the context of the how to become architect yesterday. Of course, today with the availability of the formal skill, like a skill framework itself. So basically anyone, right, who has some interest to become enterprise architect and having understand the value of business and technology relationship, that's very, very important. And of course, we also need to prescribe. Just now, I think Benjamin already mentioned that it can be prescribed as an individual, as an organization, as a training provider. You prescribe to it, it's everything out there, right? You want to hire the people, just copy and paste the job scope. The job scope is there, requirement also there, right? What you need to do. So, and then of course, with all the skill set like iTabok, TOGAF, ArchiMate, so you don't need to be 10 years. You don't need to burn millions of dollars. You can just, prescribe to it. And after that, you need to get a mentor and you become a successful architect to drive the transformation. So typically architect engagement is that you deal with multiple party, right? So basically you deal with business team. That's why we need to know the business terminology, business vision, business strategy. Then after that, of course, we also deal with technical team because we also need to know about the IT strategy, IT vision, IT operation, development life cycle, right? We also need to know the management team in terms of their KPI, their stakeholders, their driver, their goals, their concerns. And we also need to manage the vendors and the suppliers, especially the infrastructure architects, that typically we need to work very closely with the vendors when we outsource our cloud infrastructure and security, etc. And of course, the stakeholders are very, very important, so we cannot ignore them. Basically, stakeholders is someone who hold the power, right? Could be monetary power or decision power that architects need to so-called work closely with them. And of course, with the industry body like Singapore Computer Society, our ES chapters, the government, etc. So architect expectations are quite high, right? Because architect is need to interact with multiple stakeholders and multiple parties. And this is actually so-called the engagement model defined by ISA. That architect actually is the center focus. Yeah, if you can see at the center part, actually the center focus is all architect, and the outer layer actually all about driving transformation. So our job, our task is to drive the transformation within the organization. So thought leadership transformation, we understand about what our competitor is doing, what are the industry trend, and how we can apply that to our organization. Then of course, customer journey transformation, that we want to ensure that our customers are happy, right? So what sort of innovation or technology or capability that we need to add on so that our customer journey or stay with us for many years to come. And of course, our skill set as well is very, very important. The employee, we need to bring organization, to make it so-called a digital employee, right? A digital workforce. Let's go talking about skill set transformation. And the bottom part is information also is very, very important because we need to make sure that the tendency is that we have the data in our enterprise, but we don't know how to use that. So basically, the usability of the data are very weak for a decision making. That's why the architect need to come in, the information architect or data architect coming and to analyze how we can process that data. Right? Then of course, the left side on the operational and the business transformation. This or what architect need to focus at. And of course, the other side is that how we can innovate and self-disrupt our organization. So the architect is really someone that who has a so-called a foresight in terms of the industry, as well as the internal organization and the people, strategy, and etc. So there are 4 influences. The first is that we need to influence our enterprise. So we need to introduce the standardization. Right? We need to bring our enterprises always to the next level. They call it target state, right? Then the next one, we also need to show the value because when we go into the transformation, we need to invest in technology. Then how can we ensure that our investment return the ROI? How can we ensure that our technology investment bring constituent value? Constituent value means all the users, the community, or the group of the so-called stakeholders are happy with it. Right? And of course, market opportunity means we're opening up into the new venture, new capability that we cannot do before. Then of course, number 3, we also need to look at the delivery. I mean, the delivery is how we can help ensure that the project is successful, on time, on budget, and we look at the team structure and the governance on the implementation. And of course, stakeholders, we also need to make sure that we take care of them. Right? Because we need to make sure that some of them are conflicting goals. So how can we ensure that we don't get carried away by the politics? That is the message. Okay? Because sometimes if you are too lean to one of the stakeholders and the political situation that at your disadvantage, then we may lose all our work. Yeah, so architect is really expected to know the human dynamic and also the political landscape within the organization. So we need to balance all this to deliver impactful so-called presence or engagement to the organization. Then let me now focus. So the next remaining time, I will be focusing on the 7 architect roles defined in the skill framework. The first one is enterprise architect, right? The second one is the business architect. The third one is data architect. The fourth one is software architect. The fifth one is infrastructure architect. The sixth one is security architect. And the 7th one is solution architect. Okay, so this one I think is pretty comprehensive, right? Because typically the architect, the domain architect are only 4: business, data, software, and infrastructure. So the rest, enterprise architect is actually the umbrella, of the architecture, and security architect actually embedded across the domain, and solution architect is where you realize, you deliver your architecture through the project. They call it solution. Yeah. So I will be sharing with you in the next couple of slides. So I think just now you have seen Benjamin also mentioned about skill framework for ICT, right? So they got so-called five they got about 7 job cluster, but architect residing in the 5 job cluster. The first one is data and artificial intelligence, so there will be a data architect there, right? Because data architect is where they connect whatever data or information to the business. Yeah, whereby of course inside there they got the data scientist, data engineering, or DBA. All the role are defined inside there. So you can also study how the data and artificial intelligence cluster, the structure of the team, the job scope, roles, and responsibility. The next one of the infrastructure, right? So infrastructure, they got infrastructure architect. Of course, infrastructure architect don't work alone. You can see in the structure actually working with a lot of the engineer, right? With the hosting engineer, with the cloud, with the security, and etc. Then they got software architect, also working with all the software engineer, with the DevOps, with the agile team, and etc. Then they got strategy and governance. So this is where the enterprise architect are looking into aligning, realizing the strategy. Then business architect and solution architect are so-called inside the job cluster of strategy and governance. And the next one, of course, cybersecurity. I think cybersecurity is the fact that are very, very important and need to be embedded right from the business itself, right? So when you define the business architecture, you need to embed the security itself. Okay, because now I think you heard about the ransomware in the US, or the oil pipeline is get the ransomware attack, right? So we don't want that to happen. And I mean, if that should happen, how do we so-called manage or mitigate that risk? Okay, so you need to have some sort of the digital map, and all the architects are playing a critical role so that we can narrow down or we can focus to isolate certain vulnerability. Otherwise, we'll be panic and we're just waiting whether we want to pay the ransom, or we just roll back into the yesterday or 2 days ago or last week backup if we haven't backup for a week, right? So this is the reality of life. So this is the example on the so-called actually taken from the skill framework. So all the architects actually are forming enterprise architecture office. Yeah. So enterprise architecture office is just like a normal term, like PMO, right? Program management office. So they got what they call it enterprise architecture office, whereby all the architects actually in the one team, right? But in the actual work is they are posted into multiple, like just now the definition, multiple cluster. So they posted into the strategy team, they posted into the development team, they posted into infrastructure team, but actually they are one team. Because architecture is still need to be one. You cannot split the architecture into the multiple so-called independent team. It's still one team, right? It's enterprise architecture office team. So of course, they report to the head of infrastructure or head of software engineering. It's like chief architect, right? You want to call it chief architect or you want to call it director or vice president. It depends on the organization. Yeah. So basically, it's reporting to the senior management level that are overseeing the whole architecture development. So this is another example on the typically in the working environment where the architect itself is that they got the business architect, information architect. You put that into a different line of business, right? Then to focus on the business capability, then they got the security architect assigned into the IT, and there will be a solution architect that you go assign so-called the two software architect and the infrastructure architect in the data center. So this is basically how you define the architect when in the real actual project, right? They are basically assigned to a multiple team, multiple structure. That's where the so-called this type of structure are very, very important, because architect need to cover the entire enterprises, entire organization, so that nothing get left out. And we have the full visibility on the business layer, application layer, data layer, infrastructure layer, and how the system also being rolled out in the so-called software development. So the model actually is something like this. Just now we talked about the enterprise architecture office, about the PMO. Now we talk about digital transformation office, right? So this is actually the pivot model on how digital transformation office should be set up. Okay, but today many digital transformation office are actually either the renaming of the PMO, In the past, they call it program management office, and then now they change it to become digital transformation office, or they set up a new team and ask them to start visualizing, right? Creating a vision of what the enterprises should go in the next 5 years or 3 years, or etc. But actually, they need to be connected with the architecture, because just now you saw the Gartner description that enterprise architecture is the gateway for digital transformation. So typically, I think if I splash this PMO and ITSM, right, you are quite familiar. So PMO is running multiple projects. ITSM basically about digital service, right, about managing the SLA and etc. So what actually many organizations are lacking today, which is what I think the just now skill framework providing in detail, is how you set up enterprise architecture office. So what actually the job scope? How you actually assign architect into the initiative of managing the key stakeholders, strategy, and etc. So typically, there will be, of course, they've got the multiple architect, business, data, application, infrastructure, security, solution architecture, and etc. Right. So at the bottom part is where you need to have a single source of truth. So in today, of course, when we do in the era of digital, we don't do manual work. We better do a high value added work. So we typically need to have a single source of truth to manage all our architecture repository, architecture lifecycle, architecture management, architecture artifacts, right? Then once we define in the enterprise architecture office, then the program management office will be able to pick it up and update into the solutioning. Then after that, of course, the last IT service team, IT service management team should also be able to so-called carry out to do so-called support. So that's where the so-called the structure of the digital transformation office. So overseeing end to end, right? So they are not only talking about transformation, but they are actually now taking leadership in terms of the transformation for the entire organization, whereby the enterprise architecture office also under their purview, and the program management office also the execution under their purview, and also IT service management. Because if you don't do this, then the program management office will do their own way, doing a project, and only call architect on demand. This is no good, right? But actually, the flow is that architecture need to be done first, and all the gap, the requirement that need to be done, we let the so-called the PMO execute into the IT project. Then after that, hand over into the support. So if we break it down in terms of the detail, in the typical organization, typically we have the strategy. So we got the BSP, we got the ISP. Then after that, we also have the architecture in terms of the domain, business, data, application, and technology. Then after that, we got the design and we got the operation, right? So of course, if we are doing on-demand architecture, we only do it like this. So we engage the business architecture, we just do it in silo, right? We cannot connect to the rest. Then the data architect also, we're doing it in silo, application in silo, and infrastructure in silo. So whereby by right, we should be able to connect them with the enterprise architecture office, right? They can work in the multiple line of business, multiple phases of the life cycle, but they are connected, so that the program management office and IT service management office also can be aligned, right? So everything there's an alignment. But today, there are still many of the organization, they have the PMO, they have the ITSM, but they have enterprise architecture office, so-called architecture team on demand. On demand means you're still doing a silo vertical part. You need to break to the silo. You need to see all end-to-end about the enterprise. So there are 12 categories of the technical skill and competency defined. So they got business and project management, development and implementation, people development. They got business, of course, development itself, right? And then general management, sales and marketing, business finance, governance and compliance, stakeholder and contract management, design and architecture, operation and user support, strategy planning and implementation. So all these competency are required for architect to survive, right? Because without this skill, you only have the TCP/IP or the cloud information, not enough. We need to have a so-called a well-rounded information, which I'm going to share with you shortly into the deep dive in each of the role. So, for instance, in this category, design and architecture, so they also expect that architects to have a proficiency level in terms of data design, design thinking practice, embedded system integration, enterprise architecture, infrastructure, organization design, security architecture, software design, solutioning, system design. So many expectations are so-called expected if you carry the title of architects. If you don't carry the title of architect, well, nobody knows. But when you carry the title of architect, you need to possess this type of skill. And nobody born with this type of skill. So the only way is that either you are lucky enough, like myself. Actually, I didn't do a proper education on the architecture. Just happened to be I have the right mentor in the past company that I joined with. So they assigned me the right so-called job scope, and from there I can build up my architecture skill set. Okay, but those who don't have the privilege, not to worry, because they got the full training courses to help you to achieve this, to master this type of proficiency. Okay, and of course they got the generic skill, also very, very important, right? You can be super good architect, but you know, when people talk to you, people say, this Aaron, yeah, when you talk doesn't make sense. I don't want to talk to him, right? So when he talk so arrogant, I don't want to talk to him. So we need to have also master so-called human dynamic, right? With this generic skill. Okay, so here is like creative thinking. We can contribute into the discussion. We just not sitting alone, and we can talk, you know, we can start suggesting something that make people engage, right? Of course, the next one, decision making, also very, very important. We need to see how we can facilitate, right, in terms of key stakeholders making a decision. Of course, developing people also very, very important, because architect cannot be selfish. We need to be able also to manage and so-called guide the people, right? The next one, of course, digital literacy is very, very important. We cannot say I'm the architect, but actually I don't know anything about digital. We need to study, and we need to know the trend. Of course, we need to talk about global mindset. We cannot think that, oh, we are the local company, I only focus on Singapore, I only focus on the one country. No, we have to think global, because today the era of the globalization is there, right? Interpersonal skill, like just I mentioned, talking with the people, right? We don't talk with the WhatsApp or SMS or Telegram, but we talk with people, right? Sometimes we need to hear their voice. We need to meet face to face. Of course, mature leadership and lifelong learning basically is there will be some sort of a path, right? We need to see the career path. I think we are quite fortunate, because Singapore government giving us many grants, right, for us to continue learning. Okay, and of course the of course the managing the so of course managing diversity and also problem solving and resource management are very, very important, because today we don't work with the people that we know, we work with the people that we don't know, right? So we need to be able to manage a so-called sensitivity in terms of their culture or their language, right? And of course the how you allocate the resources in the optimum way. And sense making is very interesting. Basically, is that when someone tell you, Aaron, okay, what do you think about this? Let me think. And you need to be able to have the, just now, of course, connect with the creative thinking. So sense making is the ability to analyze and then see the data, how you can make use of that particular information. Of course, service orientation, teamwork is very important. Transdisciplinary thinking is also very important. Basically, we can facilitate, and you know, I mean, it's like we can disagree, we can agree on the disagreement, right? We don't need to go head on head, but it's fine. People have their own view, but you know, we can share our view, right? Of course, virtual collaboration, communication, and computational thinking are very, very critical in terms of generic skill. So let me now zoom in into the first row. They got 7 rows, right? So the first one is enterprise architect role. So every domain architect, so let me now, this one, I need to do some so-called clarification here. Every architect, if you are so-called business, data, software, infrastructure, or security and solution, actually you all call enterprise architect, right? Enterprise architect, if in terms of the medicine, is the GP, right? General practitioners. I mean, I'm a doctor, that's it. But I can be specialized in the so-called, cardiologist. I can be specialized in terms of the, many major of the medical, right? But I can call myself as a doctor specialist, but it's specialized in what domain, right? So enterprise architect basically is the general terminology name for architects, right? So this is very, very important, because we don't want to get confused with the rest. So the rest are actually more into the specialization, right? Then, of course, lead the ecosystem with the technical and business discussion. So we need to be able to be engaged or be invited to the business team, and we can so-called connect what is our strategy with the enterprise strategy. And of course, we need to look at also on the governing principle, right? We need to know about, of course, architect cannot be in the self-denial on the so-called rules, regulation, right? So we need to understand that. Right, and of course we need to look at the quality of all about our deliverable. Basically, it's like self-initiative, and of course we need to synthesize diverse enterprise need and perspective. Because what happened is that we are dealing with many key stakeholders, and interestingly, some of the key stakeholders are conflicting. Right, so how can we, as an architect, coming in to show the conflicting idea or go and make them understand. So we don't let them fight, but let them go in peace, right? Basically, tell them, okay, we understand your view, but actually, as a matter of fact, these are the so-called our finding, our impact, and etc. So in terms of the role, let me just highlight a couple of the role that I found it very interesting. The first one is business agility. So as an enterprise architect, we know that business keep changing, right? So when the business change, what's wrong with our IT system? We need to respond. Our technology need to respond. So we need to know about this business agility and incorporate it into a design. So when the business change, we don't complain, right? I think it's a good news. The business change means we are alive, we are moving, right? So in contrast, that if you don't have the architecture, when something changes, I guarantee you complain. Because why? How to change this? Impossible. Take 3 months. So we need to understand this concept that business need to be agile. So our technology need to be agile too. Then business environment analysis, also very, very important. We need to know how the actual user using it. What are their current landscape? So we need to know that. Then business innovation. Basically, we need to know that what are the current trends out there? How can we help the business? So if business innovate into this direction, can our technology support that? So that's what we need to know. Then the next one, of course, on the business performance, we need to know the business KPI and how the architect can so-called provide achieving that. And then business risk, also very common, right? We need to know about the risk of the business and how we can mitigate that, right? So if the business said, I'm worried if the system down by 5 minutes, we might lose how many million? How can we mitigate that? So architect is playing at the advisory role, right? It's pretty much aligned what the Gartner is saying in the last 5-6 years. Then IT strategy. Architect also need to play a role in defining so-called validating the strategy, right? And then organization analysis is very, very important, because sometimes the problem due not because of the technology, the problem due because of the organization structure. That's where the architects coming in to analyze that, right? So in my next my last slide will show you how we can do this. Then, of course, organization design. So sometimes we need to propose the new structure of the business. We may tell that, oh, actually the issue in the last 3 months because nobody held responsible for this particular task. So we need to change, design a new structure of the business, right? So this is where the architect are playing a proactive role. Okay, and of course, stakeholder management is very, very important. All architects need to manage stakeholders in terms of their expectation about what they want to see, what they don't want to see. And of course, the conflicting idea among the stakeholders, we need to manage that. And strategy planning is very, very important, because when the company or organization or department are developing a strategy, architect need to be there. Because why? We want to validate the strategy. Have you ever come or work in the organization that have a beautiful strategy, but nobody else know how to execute? I have, right? I work, wow, this is so beautiful, the strategy, but in my heart, how can we achieve that? How can we do that, right? But the senior management very happy, said it is a very good strategy, but we are the one who's going to do it, but we don't know how to do it because we are not ready. Maybe in 3 years, yes, but management promise by next year. So this is where the architect coming in to validate and help to so-called bringing up the point that if you want to go into realizing this strategy, these are the things that we need to do. Yeah, that's what the architect should perform that role. The next one on the business architect. So this is very interesting statement. Yeah, all domain architect. If you are not a full-time business architect, your secondary role must be a business architect. Do you know why? Otherwise, if you don't do this, if you say that, oh, Aaron, sorry, I'm a data architect. You want to ask about the business, you ask my business architecture team. I'm not there. I'm looking for the data. No, you can't. Every architect, if you're not a full-time business architect, you need to perform the secondary role of business architect. Otherwise, your data, your information, your application, your software, your infrastructure, your security doesn't give business value. Full stop. When you don't give business value, you have no value in the organization. Then what are you looking for? What are you working for? Right? You work hard, but your boss said, sorry, Aaron, I understand you work 7 days a week. Chinese New Year Eve also you're working. Public holiday also you're working, but I don't see the value. That's what happened, right? So we need to connect to the business. That's why business architecture is the mandatory or secondary role if you are not performing a full-time business architect. Okay, and of course, business architect is analyze, design, and develop business transformation roadmap plan. Yeah? And on the current versus future state, it's always current versus future state, because why? We want to achieve a better tomorrow. That's why we call it future state, right? Of course, we understand governance, framework, and etc. That's what's taken. Huh? And of course, we also need to establish a business priority. We need to know about the business urgency, right? Not IT urgency. This is a totally two different perspective. Because many IT people out there, they think, oh, business not my care. I belong to IT department. That's why some of the organizations, after they understand about this concept, they change their team. It's not they don't call it IT strategy or IT team anymore. They call it BT, business technology team. By putting the word business technology, they start realizing, hey, actually I'm part of the business. Oh, I'm not only IT people. And to the business people, hey, now Aaron is the BT, is our cousin. I should invite him for my business meeting, right? So this is where the business architect are playing a critical role. I think among all the role of architect, this one is very rare, right? We need to develop more and more business architect. And every architect, if you're a security architect, you're infrastructure architect, you are a software architect, you are a data architect, your secondary role must be a business architect. Yeah. And of course, we need to understand the driver, the concern of the key stakeholders, and we need to influence the key stakeholders too. And of course, we need to be able to synthesize diverse needs of various business units. Yeah, this business architect job, right? Basically, is what I would call business troubleshooter. So any issue about the business, about the whatever operational, the business architect should be able to pinpoint where does the source come from. That's very, very important, right? And we need to pinpoint quickly, not say, boss, can you give me 1 week? The boss said, no, 1 week. I need it today before we go home. Tell me the solution. Where does this come from? Where does this problem? What is the root cause? That's why you need to have the architect. Then architects should be able to perform this, right? Of course, some of you who are thinking, how you do that? I will show you later towards the end of my slide. Then some of the roles that are very, very critical on the business architect, business agility are taken, right? We need to move fast because the world is moving fast. We cannot be left behind. Of course, we need to know business environment analysis, same thing like enterprise architecture. Then business innovation, very, very important. Business need, business performance, business process engineering, business requirement mapping, business risk management, right? All these are critical for a business success. And business architect need to perform the role. And by the way, all the architect need to perform this role because everyone need to perform the role of business architect. And of course, IT strategy also very, very important. We need to influence the IT strategy, how the IT strategy being formulated, right? We also need to know about the organizational design, then stakeholder management, strategy implementation, right? How we execute the strategy. That's the architect job as well. It's playing a role. Because otherwise, the strategy is only, empty promise, right? They want to do this, they want to do that, but actually we don't have the capability to do that. That's why the business architect or architect job is that we need to develop or build that capability, right? Strategy planning as well. We need to get involved. Yeah. So the next one is on the data architect. So hopefully you get the feel on the role of business architect. And every architect, if you're not a full-time business architect, you need to perform the role of business architect. The next one, data architect, right? So basically to plan, analyze, design, and develop data implementation roadmap plan, right? Basically, again, moving from the current state to the future state. Yeah. And of course, the interesting statement here is that the future state of the business architecture, right? So whatever you do in your data implementation roadmap, what you're trying to achieve, you need to fulfill the future state target of the business architecture. Because business architecture is a so-called direction, right? Where the organization is moving. Because where the key stakeholders of the business are inside when we formulate the business architecture, that's why we capture their concern, their driver, their goals, their strategy, their capability, and etc. Okay, so our data architect role is that aligning to that. How can we help to achieve the future state business architecture? Okay, and of course about the findability, about finding the right information, also very, very important. And of course work with the business team, right? And of course need to meet internal and external business objective, right? We also need to orchestrate various information to support strategic decision making. That's very, very important, because many organizations have their data, but they are not sure about how they can make use of data to make it, today the context of the data is actually is another oil, another money basically the source of the money, right? You can sell the data. Yeah, same like the oil. So we need to be able, the architect need to be able to decup and orchestrate the various information and turn that into the strategic decision-making process. Of course, you can work hand in hand with your data scientists to know how we can format or transform the data. Yeah. Of course, information management, we also develop all the standard and the guideline, yeah, about how we can so-called perform the role. So some of the skill required, right? Some I think are quite repetitive from the previous one. So I just highlight here like business need analysis. Then the data strategy is very, very important, right? So data strategy basically align with the so-called enterprise strategy. Basically, all the strategy need to be consolidated. You cannot run multiple strategy, yeah. And of course, security architecture is very, very important, because like cybersecurity, when they steal the information, that's why the data architect also need to work hand in hand with the security architects, right? How they can secure so-called the data, because once the data is stolen, could be the business is in danger, yeah, because you're not only endangering the business, but you may get fined by the authority because the data gets stolen. Huh? Then of course stakeholder management, very, very important. We need to know about the expectation, right? Strategy planning, yeah, is also very, very key in terms of the involvement of data architects. The next one, software architect, right? So basically develop a software implementation roadmap plan, again, to achieve a future state business architecture. Yeah, that's very, very important. So as an architect is that we need to, whatever we do in the software, in the data, etc., we are trying to achieve the target state of the business architecture. Yeah, of course, we need to also establish the business priority, assign software architecture requirement, align with the both business and IT. Okay, so we are also working very closely with the both business and IT team, right? Not only with the developer, that one is taken with the IT team. Yeah, also we need to do an influential key role. And of course, we need to develop a standard and guideline, right? So that the development lifecycle can be so-called monitored or governed. Yeah, and of course, need to be imaginative, creative. So these are the quality attributes of a software architect, right? In fact, all the architects also need to have this type of the quality. So we need to be able to, not only critical thinking, but we also need to be imaginative and able to so-called connect with the diverse discipline. So in terms of the role, the requirement, the technical skill and competency, so I think it's pretty much all the architects have all the business need analysis, right? So we need to understand business, yeah. Then after that, of course, we need to understand also the data strategy, because application and the data is, the application access the data. So we need to know their strategy, right? And of course, we need to know about the security, because, we need to do application in terms of the penetration, in terms of the, all the security, secure code principle that need to be followed. Of course, stakeholder management, strategy planning are also very, very critical. So architects are involved in all these so-called activity and require this skill set. Yeah. The next one on the infrastructure. So basically, develop infrastructure implementation and roadmap plan, again, to achieve the future state of business architecture, right? So whatever you're going to do about cloud, right? About, DevOps, about your disaster recovery, about availability, you need to look at where the future state business architecture is, because you need to evolve and you need to support so-called the business with your infrastructure. So of course, we need to also translate the overall business strategy into an infrastructure architecture strategy. That's very, very interesting. Yeah? The second point here. So we need to understand the business strategy, right? So you cannot say, oh, sorry, Aaron, I don't understand what business strategy. I only look after the, the data center. No, you can't. You need to know the business strategy. Then how that can be translated into your infrastructure architecture strategy? Okay. Then of course, we need to also engage with the business leader, right? And then synthesize critical infrastructure gap in the current technology environment, right? So we anticipate business challenges, because I think infrastructure today are playing a critical role, right? If the system say getting slower, they know who they call, right? The infrastructure guy. So architect need to know where are the business anticipation in terms of the load, in terms of the throughput and expectation, etc. Okay. Of course, we need to evaluate infrastructure performance, again, changing business and user requirement. So we need to be able, basically, all the architect work closely with the business. Remember just now the slide earlier that you assign in the multiple line of business, so architect are working there, right? Working with the so-called various business unit. So in terms of the role, again, infrastructure also need to have a lot of business, if you see here, right? Requirement, business continuity, business environment analysis, business innovation, business analysis, business requirement mapping, business risk management. Also need to know about security architecture, right? The infrastructure, the network need to be secured, right? Also solution architecture about how the system itself, so-called the solution to be deployed, right? Need to be supported. Stakeholder management also are very, very important for the infrastructure architect. If you see here, it's quite interesting, because they got so many business technical skill on top of the business required for an infrastructure architect. This is the right one. Let me just share with you, actually quite a number of years ago that I presented in one of the seminars that I mentioned that all the architects need to master the business architecture, understand the strategy and etc. Then, at the end of my talk in the seminar, they got one CIO of the bank give me the business card. They told me, Aaron, your talk is very interesting. Can you meet up with my architecture lead? Okay. Basically, the CIO didn't mention the chief architect, but architecture lead. Basically, he's the highest level the architects in the bank, right? Of course, they got many architects under him. So of course, the CIO connect by email. Then I think I was having a chat with him for the 5-10 minutes. Then after that, I struck him with the first question. I said, in your role as an architect, how do you align your strategy with the business strategy? You know what is his response to me? He told me that I asked the wrong person. I asked the wrong team. I should ask the business team. Now in my heart, no wonder I knew why that your CIO asking me to meet up with you. Okay. Then of course we end up nicely. Then after that, of course, I talked with the CIO. I feedback to him. I said, now I understand why you asked me to meet up with him, right? So he's in that state, but I think it's not his mistake, because he didn't know that architect need to have this type of the technical skill and competency, right? Now, if I have this, if at the time I have this skill framework by IMDA, I can bring and ask them to print out and take a look. This infrastructure architects or the business competency required, right? So at the time, just tell them, yeah, you need to know that. And at the time, I just told them that that's why so many. If you dig up the many IT people that go up into the senior management, typically they have so-called taken some way in their career the MBA, because the MBA will supplement their knowledge about the business. Because when you study computer science, they don't teach you about business, very little, right? Because the computer science in the faculty as well cannot teach the business subject, because it belongs to the business department, right? To the finance department. But in the reality is that you want to be successful as an architect, you need to master the business. Yeah. The next one, solution. So basically, again, we need to, solution is quite interesting. Solution is the blend about how you realize your architecture. Okay. So just now talking about business architect, data architect, software architect, infrastructure architect, they define the so-called architecture. Then after they define the architecture, someone need to execute, right? The job to execute is called solution architect. Okay, so solution architect actually is the role that you are actually implementing, right? Implementing the future state architecture. So just now on all the architecture domains, so the business, data, software, infrastructure, and the security, all you need to implement that. Yeah. So basically, you also need to understand business priority, right? Then you need to also understand both business and IT. And of course, you need to understand the gaps, right? When you implement, actually, you're implementing the gaps, the architecture gaps in the business, data, software, infrastructure and security. And you need also familiar with the software development methodology, right? If they're using DevOps or Agile, you need to adapt to it, or product development methodology. Okay. Then of course you are collaborating with the various departments on architecting solution design, right? Typically they got the project management, they got the tester, they got all the support team, right? And of course you need to embrace the industry revolution 4.0 technology, right? That's taken already. You need to look at how the IR 4.0 technology can be embraced in your solutioning when you do so-called project delivery. So typically, when the project say 8 months, the solution architect will be assigned to a particular project, right? So that's typically so-called the solution architect is the architect that you assign into the project, right? So that means if you are in the construction, is someone that are going on site into the construction, whereby the rest of architects are still in the drawing board, defining all the so-called schema and the blueprint for the particular architecture. Okay, in terms of the skill, so again, you need to know, of course, the skill like Agile, etc. is taken. You need to know that. But I'm just highlighting on the business agility, business environment analysis, business innovation, business analysis, business performance management, business process engineering, business requirement mapping, business risk management, right? All these are expected mastery in terms of the technical skill by the solution architect, right? And of course the skill as well. So this one is very, very important. That's why, you know, sometimes that you know, if you don't have this skill, you still can perform the work of solution architect, but let me tell you, you deliver little value to the business, right? If you want to know whether you are delivering value to the business, you need to talk with the business team, right? Business team will tell you, how do you deal with Aaron, right? Has he bring value to you, right? That's why if we don't know the business, we cannot bring value, because we don't know what the business is talking about, right? So we need to master the business so that we can deliver a solution that can help the business. Okay, of course, the IT strategy, organization analysis, organization design, and solution architecture is, of course, is a must. Stakeholder management as well, right? Strategy implementation, strategy planning. All these are a critical skill for solution architect. Okay, the last role is actually a security architect, right? Security architect also, again, designing the security principle, right, or governance based on the target business architecture realization. So basically is that they understand the business. So understand because every business got a different appetite. So architects, security architect need to ensure that the business architecture is handled first, right? Before you talk about securing the network, securing the server, etc. That one is taken. But we need to address the business security architecture in regard to the security. Okay, so we engage the business leader and synthesize their critical security concern. It's very, very important. We need to know the impact to the business, right? And we need to know about their security appetite, and perhaps we need to educate them, create awareness about what sort of security option that we are talking about. Because when you're talking about security, is that the price can escalate to the multiple amount, right? So we need to know and we need to balance that. What we call it a trade-off lah. And of course, we need also to have a unique and highly complex project the skill, right? Involvement. So in terms of design and implementation of the skill system architecture. Okay. So we also need to mitigate certain security risks. So an expert also need to know all the cybersecurity act, right? You cannot be ignorant. Say, I'm the security architect, but I don't know about the security act, right? And of course, when talking about the security, is that different country, different industry have their own act. Right, so we need to know that, yeah. So and we need to apply the so-called the security compliance into our implementation. So some of the skill, technical skill required, business analysis, very, very important. So a security architect also need to understand business, right? We need to know cyber risk, right? Now we cannot avoid this. So we need to also, of course, master security architecture, solution architecture when they are doing development in terms of the database design, on network design, your programming code as well need to be secured. Okay, then of course need to have a strategy, stakeholder management, strategy implementation, right? Planning as well. Okay, so all these, the importance of architect are very, very critical, because what happens is that if you don't have the architecture, this is what happens in many organizations today. They do the strategy and they go straight into the transformation. Basically, it's executing a project. By right, they need to have some sort of the digital architecture, right? Digital enterprise architecture, so that they understand about the strategy they are doing. They understand about the gap that between the current and the future state, right? Then from there, the gap is consolidated to become to be executed in the transformation project. So instead of 1 to 3, we go into the number 2, because when you do 1 to 3, someone have to do the architecture. And how the architecture is being done? Is being done while you're executing the transformation. And this is basically the root cause of many so-called hiccup in the digital transformation initiative. Because by right, they should do the proper architecture first, then the execution, where, of course, in the context here is solution architects, right? Executing the digital transformation. So the concept actually is that we want to realize a digitally connected enterprise, right? Just now from the strategy, just now you see all the skill required. So when you apply it like this. So architect involved in defining so-called the meta model on the, or discovering on the strategy, then after that, how that impact to the business, how that impact to the technology. So I talk about IR 4.0, right? So everything is vice versa. So we have so-called a digitally connected model of the enterprise. So if any component or the business change or strategy change, we know exactly which processes, which data, which attribute, which network, which server, which so-called hosting will be impacted. This is what we need to know. Because if anything happen like cybersecurity attack, we can isolate the root cause quite quickly if we have a proper so-called a digitally connected enterprise. So the concept is something like this, right? So we want to know that any changes in any of the layers, from strategy to the business to the information application infrastructure, we can so-called understand the impact. Yeah. The purpose, of course, we want to be successful in our transformation journey and execution. So behind the scene actually is where we need to develop a digital strategy. We need to connect between business and IT strategy. So now I'm talking more on the implementation part, right? Now you understand the skill, you can apply it here, right? You understand business and IT. Then after that, we understand into the doing the digital enterprise architecture activity. So basically is that we understand the business architecture, the information architecture, application and technology architecture. So we get all the gaps, right? The gap is the one that will, if we fill up the gaps, it will bring us to the target architecture. Does that make sense? Yeah? So this is where the transformation project need to be executed in this manner. Then this is another analogy. So typically is that enterprise are quite complex, right? They got the knowledge, they got the people, they got the process, they got the technology, and typically they're all running in silo by department or by business unit. And typically they don't like to share with other business unit, right? Because for instance, I want to get particular information, some other department will tell me, Aaron, even your boss have no access to this information. Forget about it. You're getting this information. In my heart, are we working in the same company? And I need that information so that I can, help to formulate a new strategy, but they don't share with me. So how can we break this silo? The only thing breaking this silo is we applying the architecture, right? So let me show you how we do this. So typically we come up with the so-called the modeling, right? We understand the motivation and strategy layer of every business unit. So we already capture their KPI, their goal, their driver, their resources, their capability. Then after that, we also need to know what actually in every department are doing, right? In terms of their how many roles out there, what are the processes, what are the functions, what are product or services they're offering, right? I can see that. It's like GPS, right? It's like 15 years ago, all the car in Singapore will have so-called street directory. Today, how many cars in Singapore still have street directory? If you have, then your car, it should be antique, right? It should be collected item. 15 years ago, most of the car now is just turn on the phone, right? And then we can turn on the Waze or the GPS to drive us, the Google Map. So the same thing with enterprise. So I can see what actually is every department are doing. Then I can also know what application they are using, right? And I also know what technology layer or infrastructure they are running on, and I also know what data they are consuming, or they are utilizing it, right? Because with that, then I can understand about if the strategy change, I can look at it. Oh, actually, some of the business layer, application, technology, and information, I need to transform. I need to change, because why? Otherwise, the new strategy direction cannot be fulfilled. So I can see it like this. Of course, I can turn this one to the dashboard, but that one is on my another topics of presentation. After that, we can also see how the solution architecture implementing the project, right? So this pretty much the wrap up of my presentation. And this actually is the available training. I think we at the SCS also, we offer a quite number of comprehensive training. Yeah. So we have the training, of course, on all the skill set just now we talk about, to bring you up to become a so-called competence architect. Otherwise, we thought this type of training, you still can become a competent architect, but it may take you 10 years or 15 years, right? Because quite a number of, I heard that, many people say, oh, I wish I knew this type of the training 10 years ago, right? Why I just found out got such available training today. So this is typically the so-called the feedback that I got from participant in the past. So basically, all these are quite critical to drive about business architecture fundamental, architecture core, TOGAF, ArchiMate, TOGAF business architecture, business technology strategy, and all the specialization on the top, business information infrastructure software and solution, right? Whereby the security, of course, is embedded across, and enterprise architecture is a so-called a generic name of architect that I just described. Yeah. So of course, there are available funding out there, right? So these are some of the courses that you want to take it up. I think this is very, very limited. They got the 95% grant plus the daily allowance. I think that one you can check with our SCS office to find out more. Okay, so the next event, so we have in the next less than 2 weeks, we have the Enterprise Architecture Symposium between Singapore Computer Society and Hong Kong Computer Society. So I would encourage you to attend, because this is we are the two powerful nation in Asia, Hong Kong and Singapore. The Computer Society join force, and we are delivering so-called a joint symposium. Yeah. And of course, they got another upcoming event by our Singapore Computer Society, by our chapters as well, that is coming on the 16th of June. Yeah. All right. So this is the last slide. So please fill up your evaluation form, but please don't leave. We still have a Q&A. So Benjamin and me will be available for the next half an hour to answer any question that you may have. And you may start typing in your question on the chat, right? In the meantime, if you can scan the QR code to get a so-called for us to receive the feedback from you. Okay, so I will just leave for another 10 seconds before in the meantime, those who have completed the evaluation feedback form, you can start typing in any question that you may want to ask Benjamin or myself. Okay, so I will be facilitating this Q&A for the next 30 minutes. Okay, there are quite a number of the question out there. Let me just read one by one. Okay. Okay. Okay, there's the question, I think, for Benjamin. How often does this framework get updated?
Yeah, hi. So for the skills framework, okay, it used to be updated every 1 to 2 years. But I think recently, in line with SSG, which actually is the one that's actually driving the development of the skills frameworks, they have taken a more dynamic approach to refreshing the skills framework. So as and when there are any areas or teams that we feel could do with a refresh, I think we'll work with them on a refresh. So for example, the recent refresh was focusing on AI and 5G. So these are example of certain areas that we want to look into, and then this is when we'll start a refresh.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next question is, I think, asking about from Krista, right? This seems to be quite high level of skill for enterprise architect. How about the level before the architect and the ops? Okay, I think is there all the skill that you can imagine that exist today that are relevant in the today context of the digital transformation or digital era are all inside there. It's just that due to the focus on this webinar, I'll be focusing a lot on the architect skill set. But actually, they got how many total, Benjamin? I think the skill quite a lot, right? I think it's maybe 100 skills or more. There are many out there. The role is pretty, whatever you can think of, from the developer, engineer to the project management, all there inside there. Okay, if you don't get the copy, I think we can, yeah, you can share or you can download freely. It's available on the website. Okay, the next question will be, to clarify, there is no one single enterprise architect. If you look at the skill and requirement presented, it is a person with white hair, literally, because you have to have many experiences. I'm not sure that EA is the generic name for all architects. The EA is responsible for the enterprise globally. The domain architects have the depth in their domain, and yes, they have to think globally and enterprise-wide. Totally agree on the fact that domain architects should have a secondary role as business architect. So basically making a comment, except that to clarify, there's no one single architect. If you look at the skill requirement presented, is a person with white hair because you have to have many experience. Okay, there was my presentation. Actually, I want to highlight, if we don't have this type of skill framework that IMD has done a good job, we have to do like what I described, right? You have to be lucky enough, working for 10 years at least, and you must be in 10 years, you cannot perform the one role. You must be lucky enough to jump around. Every 2 years, you keep moving as a tester, developer, and lucky enough, you can become CTO because you understand the strategy, right? I was one of the luckiest person because in the last, before I, when actually my career path as an architect actually is not by my choice. It's just given by my boss. Okay, my boss suddenly give me the title of architect, and you know what happened back then, 20 years ago, 15 years ago? I cannot find any training. I cannot find any education. No skill framework back then. So how do I define as an architect? I have to force myself to think like an architect. That's the only way, right? Then I just joined, like, at the time, the most architect is the Java certified architect. That's the nearest in the year 1995, is it? Java certified architect. That's it. I took that one. And you know what, in Java certified architect, I just learned about the Java programming only, right? Then after that, my boss sent me to meet with the business people. Then I have no choice. What to talk with the business people? I don't know what to ask. Then you learn from there, right? So yeah, in the past have to go through that way, but now you don't need to go through that way because they got the comprehensive training, they got comprehensive job scope, they got comprehensive guideline, and some more. This one you can bring it to your organization, right? You can bring it to your organization and you can propose to your human resource. Because why? From IMDA, what? Benjamin, you want to comment something on this? I think you're muted, Benjamin.
Sorry. Sorry. I was just saying that, I think you pretty much covered what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, the next one is, I found, what is this? How to find, okay. Is there any overlap the role between governance, enterprise architecture, and cybersecurity? No overlapping. Architect will be assigned accordingly to their job role and function, right? What they call it, enterprise architecture office, right? So everyone doing a different part. It's like a one body. You got the hand, you got the leg, you got the eyes, you got the ear. So everyone played a so-called a different role. And the role, fortunately, has been well defined in this skill framework. You just open it up and you can see for it. So no overlapping. Yeah, everyone aligns in the choir. Like you got 1,000 musicians all playing the same song in harmony. Okay, that's my question. Benjamin, want to add?
Yeah, sorry. What overlap? Yeah, so I think basically like what Aaron mentioned. There is, while there is specializations for different tracks, for different architect roles in different job areas or job clusters, right? In the end, they're really basically for architecture to be strategy to be successful. All the architects and different teams under them have to work together in order to make the organization architecture strategy successful. So while there is overlap, there are some certain overlaps, but I think each architect role still has its role to play in order to bring value to for whatever respective areas they're specializing in. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is that if a company just start its EA program, so you just started your EA program, right, internally, and find it hard to acquire EA talents, which is why we have the EA chapters, because we are addressing this awareness, right? Because there'll be more and more people moving towards the talent, and we need to so-called they need to follow a certain. We need to groom them properly, lah. because otherwise they carry the architect, but actually they don't execute the job of architects, right? It's very frustrating for both the organization and also the professionalism, right? The professional itself. That's why we got this type of guideline. Then it's very easy. We can just tell, oh, okay, this is the IMDA guideline of architects, right? It's very comprehensive. Right? Then after that, of course, now the question is that is outsourced vendor of a viable solution in view of confidentiality of info such as a business strategy? Well, there will be NDA sign, right? I mean, today, if you look out the NDA, you go to the lawsuit. It's just like that, the way it is. You want, Benjamin, you want to comment on this?
No, I think, yeah, you have pretty much said it. I think while it is difficult to acquire EA talents, it might be difficult to acquire EA talents. Outsourcing is, the thing about outsourcing is that usually it's on a project basis or on a periodic basis. So I think in order for your EA strategy to succeed in the long term, it might be useful to consider whether or not it would be suitable or is it possible to set up your own EA team. And if not, then to use outsourcing more as an interim solution rather than a long-term solution. That's my view.
Yeah, I think just to add into that is that I think now everything is available, right? How you set up the EAO function, they got the engagement model, your life cycle, you know, your repository, team structure, roles and responsibility. Pretty much out there is already, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Just need to adapt and adopt to it. Okay, the next one is that who ensures that each role has the skill in the framework required, individual, institution, or employers? I guess everybody lah, right? I don't think can be silo to, oh, it's the institution responsibility. I mean, institution itself can provide certification, right? That doesn't guarantee you're certified to become a good architect. That takes some time for you to experience and also master on the job training, right? And of course, the employer itself need to provide a conducive environment that the architect is really performing the role of architect. Don't just give them the word architect and then they call it Kwakaliao. Kwakaliao mean architect lah, do everything lah. Printer jam also call architect. But yeah, so we need to define the job role properly lah. Right? Yep. Benjamin, you want to add something?
No, I was just agreeing with whatever you said. Yeah, it's everyone's responsibility, like, you know, to make sure that you have the skills needed to perform your role sufficiently. Yeah.
Okay, now the question, next one. Is there any specific courses or training for security architect? Well, if you, the security architect typically is combination between the two, between the TOGAF and SAPSA. That's what I come to know. These are two powerful TOGAF framework, and then SAPSA, and you need ArchiMate. These three. These are so-called, and also the quality attributes. You know, it's not a single source of the security architect, because if you want to talk on the single source of the security training, typically by the vendor, right? You go to any vendor, if they're security vendor, they give you the training, but that one is more on the configuring their platform or the vendor. But it's not about securing the entire enterprise, right? I mean, of course, they're securing, but using their vendor. But what we are talking architecture here is that we need to have a generic framework, right, for us to be able to evolve with the business. Okay, then after that, we can plug in the vendor solution. Basically, is that you define the architecture first and you look for the vendor. Today, the other way around. They look for the vendor first, and after that, they call it the vendor become the architects. So, supposed to be the other way around. You understand the architecture first, understand the business, then you look for the security, right? Addressing the security from there. Then got something, IMDA site still showing GSC, but SSG shows CCS. Oh, that one I need to check, Benjamin.
Yeah, for this, I think this this is a recent change. I think the SSG changed the terminology for generic skills competency to I understand like critical core skills. So I think it's just a change in terminology, but I think the content of the structure of the GSC is still pretty much intact. So Lim Hong, I think you still can use the current structure or the documents as reference points for the skills framework. There's no change in content. It's just a change in terminology. Yeah.
All right, thanks. And then someone missed the earlier session, and may I know the slide will be shared? Yes, the slide will be shared as well as the video. You can replay in the SCS website. They got all the resources there. Yeah, so I think will be up maybe 1 week or more, but normally 1 week lah. Okay, should be by this month. The next one is, I find MD website is easier to use. SSG site is very user unfriendly. That one I cannot comment.
I can't comment for SSG also, but I guess if you find the SSG site, if you find IMDA site more useful to use, then you can use ours. I guess that's the benefit of having two different sites to reference. Yeah.
Right.
There's also one on the one more question on Infocomm, whether is it still relevant to fix the job role name. Okay, so I guess this one goes back to the earlier point I mentioned, I guess, when I was sharing the on the skills framework, right? We do understand that certain organizations, especially the small, medium enterprises or the startups, right? They might not have very fixed job roles, or even for areas, it might not be very fixed. It could be very dynamic, or it could be cross-functional. So I guess the skills framework, our intention is to use it as a starting point based on what is commonly understood across the industry. But I think for certain organizations which the lines might not be so clear, or job roles might not be so clear cut, right? I think it would be useful for you to contextualize to see what roles are relevant to your organization. You can even combine, mix and match, or subtract based on whatever your organization needs. So I guess what the skills framework brings of value is to give you a baseline, and then from there you add on or subtract based on whatever you feel is useful to your organization or your role.
Okay, the next question, I think, Benjamin, you want to share? Do you want to answer this? The skill framework for ICT doesn't list the educational training required.
Okay, I know for IMDA's website, we do have a list of training courses that we support, and they are actually segmented based on technology areas. So areas such as data analytics, cybersecurity, AI, IoT, for example. So I guess that could be one way you can filter and see which courses or programs are relevant to your role from there. The reason why we didn't drill it down to the specific skills is because certain courses cut across different skills. So it's very, if you were to list it based on specific skills, right, you end up with a very long list of courses tagged to different skills. So it might be easier to just use the tag area to filter, and then from there you see which courses are more suitable to your role, and then you can click on them and find out more from there. Hopefully that will be a useful process or guideline for you to find out which courses are relevant to your role. And sorry, just to add, all the courses that are listed on our website are all aligned to the skills framework. Yeah.
I think the other thing is that we also they got some sort of the so-called like training need analysis. Basically, is skill assessment, because is that you don't attend the course that you already know, you attend the course that you don't know, right? I mean, there's something that you want to know more. Okay, so for instance, like many people asking me, I'm already performing the job of software developer for many years, and I think I'm performing the software architect. Should I take the software architecture path, right? I'm talking about software architecture path mean, that is like they want to become a software architect. So I said, no, better not. You're already doing software architecture for 15 years. I think you better focus on the business architect or solution architecture. So something that complementing, you don't need to, I mean, you're already doing like, infrastructure for the last 15 years. Why do you want to become infrastructure architect? I mean, yes, if you have plenty of time and you already master the other skills. So you learn something that you think that can enhance your knowledge, not something you already know. I mean, of course, unless that you think, oh, I just need to get recognition and I need to get the badge, and that's fine. You need to get the badge, just get the badge. Okay. Yeah. Any other question? We still got 15 more minutes. Oh, everyone already yep, understand already. I think if no more question, then Benjamin, you want to have a closing remark? Oh, yep. Benjamin.
Yeah, I guess for me, I hope the sharing on the skills framework for ICT is useful as a starting point to give you a better idea of how to interpret the skills framework, and then what are the roles and skills that are included as part of it. And then from there, you can actually download more information. Actually, the documents that actually tag to every role and skill in the skills framework. So if you want to find out more, you can actually refer to you can go to either SSG's webpage or IMDA's webpage to find out more on the skill framework, and then download documents from there to find out more exactly on what each role encompasses and what are the skills that are needed for each role. Yeah.
Right, thank you. I think for those who are not a member of SCS, please do join us and also join our chapters. And also do not forget we are running the Enterprise Architecture Awards for 2021. So if you know if you're part of the architecture team, please download. And of course, it's no charge. It's the complimentary. We don't charge for that, and you get a recognition. So please download the information from our SCS website. They got the awards site for enterprise architecture. And yeah, otherwise I will see you in the next event, which is less than 2 weeks from now. Okay, with that, thank you so much for your participation and stay safe and see you again. Bye.